The text arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and in retrospect, that should have been my very first warning sign. They say nothing good ever happens after midnight, but in my family, the drama usually starts just a few minutes early. I was almost asleep, the quiet hum of my penthouse air conditioning the only sound in the room, until my phone vibrated with a violence that made my heart skip a beat. It was a message in the family group chat. My brother, Ethan, the perpetual golden child, the man who lived for the spotlight, had typed a message that felt like a sudden explosion. Big announcement. It read, followed by 3 champagne emojis, the kind that felt too bright for such a late hour. Jennifer and I are finally getting married. June 15th. Details to follow. The digital floodgates opened immediately. My phone didn't stop buzzing for 20 minutes. Aunts I hadn't spoken to in years were sending crying emojis. Cousins were asking about the bar, and my mother, she was predictably effusive. So, happy for you both. My handsome boy is finally settling down. I watched the screen, feeling a strange, hollow distance. I typed a simple, polite response. Congratulations, Ethan. Really happy for you. But then, I saw it. Those 3 little gray dots, appearing, disappearing, then reappearing. Someone was typing a private message. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't the group chat. It was Ethan. We need to talk about the wedding. Call me tomorrow morning. No heart emoji, no thanks, sis. Just a cold, clinical instruction. Before we dive into the morning that shattered my relationship with my brother, welcome to Bitter and Sweet. This is a place for stories that hurt, stories that heal, and stories that reveal the truth hidden behind beautiful faces. If you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe and join us as we uncover the cost of being invisible, because sometimes the person everyone ignores is the one holding all the power. I didn't sleep well. That cold feeling in my stomach, it felt like a heavy stone. Ethan called at 8 a.m. sharp. My brother was never a morning person. He usually slept until noon if he could, which told me he had been awake for hours, practicing what he was about to say. Hey, I answered, my voice still thick with sleep. Congratulations again, Ethan. I saw the group chat was going crazy. There was a long silence on the other end, the kind of silence that feels like the air before a storm. Yeah, thanks, he finally said, his voice sounding tight, rehearsed. So, here's the thing, Emma. Jennifer and I have been talking, and we're doing a really specific aesthetic for this wedding. Everything is very curated, very intentional. I stood in my kitchen, looking out at Central Park, waiting for the blow I knew was coming. We're keeping the guest list extremely tight, he continued, his voice getting faster now. Intimate, only the people who really, well, people who fit the vibe we're going for. The vibe? I asked. My voice as flat as the horizon. And the thing is, he exhaled. I could almost hear him shrugging through the phone. Jennifer is really concerned about the photography. We're spending $15,000 on a photographer. Her dress is a custom Vera Wang. The venue is this incredible estate in the Hamptons. Everything has to be perfect, Emma. The photos are going to be in magazines. Ethan, I said, putting the coffee down. What are you trying to say? Just say it. There was a sharp intake of breath, and then the words came out in a rush. You're not invited to the wedding. We think it's better if you just sit this one out. The silence that followed was so loud it made my ears ring. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry yet. Instead, I felt a morbid curiosity, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Why? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Jennifer says you'd ruin the photos. You know how you dress, Emma? Target and Old Navy, the nerdy tech look. We can't have that in the official album. You don't fit with our crowd. Her friends are fashion influencers, people with actual style. Having you there, it would just be awkward. I stayed in that spot for a long time after the line went dead, staring at my reflection. Ethan's words were still echoing in the room. You don't fit the vibe. Target and Old Navy. It was funny in a dark, twisted way. I was wearing a $2,000 cashmere robe, standing in a penthouse that cost more than my parents' entire neighborhood, and my own brother thought I was a charity case. "Don't be dramatic about this," he had said, right before hanging up. "It's not personal, you're just not really wedding material, no offense." No offense. The two words people use right after they've slapped you in the face. I walked over to the window, watching the tiny, ant-like people walking along the edge of Central Park. I wondered for the 1,000th time how we had gotten here. My family had always seen what they wanted to see. Ethan was the golden child, handsome, charming, always landing on his feet because my parents were always there to catch him. He made $95,000 a year in marketing, but he lived like a king because my dad subsidized his rent. And Jennifer, she was a professional tastemaker, an influencer with 47,000 followers who spent every waking second trying to look like she belonged in a world she couldn't afford. And then there was me, the invisible sister. The one who went to Columbia for computer science, the one who didn't come home for holidays because I was working 18-hour shifts in a cramped office, building something from nothing. They thought I was barely scraping by, and I let them.
Why?
Because I had learned early on that my family's love came with a price tag. When they thought I had nothing, they pitied me. They were proud of my little job, but they never asked questions. If they knew the truth, if they knew I had just sold my cybersecurity firm for $340 million, they wouldn't love me. They would want pieces of me. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. "Honey," Ethan explained the wedding situation. "I know you're disappointed, but please, let's not make this difficult. It's a special day, and Jennifer has been under so much stress." "Okay," I typed back. Nothing more. No argument, no tears. My mother had never been proud of my achievements. She didn't even understand them. But she was proud of me now. She was proud that I was accepting my own exclusion with maturity. I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile spreading across my face. Ethan wanted a specific aesthetic. He wanted a wedding that looked like wealth and power. He had no idea that while he was busy borrowing luxury for a day, I was busy owning it for a lifetime. I sat in the silence of my office for a long time. The weight of the acquisition papers under my fingers felt different today. Usually, these numbers were just a scorecard, a proof of my hard work, but today they felt like a weapon. $127 million post-tax. That was my personal take. I could buy Ethan's dream wedding venue, the estate, the flowers, and the custom Vera Wang dress 100 times over, and still have enough to buy the magazine he wanted to be featured in. But Ethan didn't know that. To him, I was still the sister who wore the same faded hoodie for 3 years. He didn't realize that the hoodie was vintage cashmere, or that I wore it because I was too busy protecting the world's data to worry about my vibe. "Your brother did what?" Claire's voice broke through my thoughts. I hadn't realized I'd told her, but then again, Claire knew everything. She had been with me since the garage days. She had seen the sweat, the tears, and the blood it took to build this empire. "He uninvited me," I said, my voice sounding distant, even to my own ears. "He's worried I'll ruin the wedding photos. Apparently, I'm not fashionable enough for his influencer crowd." Claire stared at me, her jaw literally dropping. She looked down at my outfit. Today it was a custom-tailored Dior suit, and then back at my face. Is he blind? Or just remarkably stupid? "He's neither," I replied, standing up to walk toward the window. "He's just committed to a version of me that doesn't exist anymore. He needs me to be the struggling nerd so he can feel like the successful star. It's the only way his world makes sense." "So, what are you going to do?" Claire asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Are you going to tell them? Are you going to walk into that rehearsal dinner and drop the bank statements on the table?" I turned around, a slow, cold smile spreading across my lips.
No.
"If I tell them, they'll just apologize because they want the money. They'll invite me because I'm an asset, not because I'm family. I don't want an apology born out of greed." I walked back to my desk and picked up a heavy, cream-colored invitation that had arrived by messenger that morning. It wasn't Ethan's. It was embossed with gold leaf, the seal of the city's Innovation Bureau. June 15th, I read aloud. The same night as the wedding. The Tech Innovation Gala. I'm being honored as Founder of the Year. The mayor is presenting the award. Every major CEO and journalist in the country will be there. Claire's eyes widened as she caught on. The press coverage for that gala is massive. It'll be all over Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, the evening news. Exactly, I said, my voice low and steady. Ethan wants a wedding that looks like a masterpiece. He wants everyone to look at his photos and see a life of luxury. Well, I'm going to give the world something else to look at that night. I'm going to show them what real power looks like, and he's going to have to watch it from the sidelines of his own wedding. The weeks leading up to June 15th were a strange blur, a double life that was finally starting to bleed together. On the surface, I was still the disappointing sister, the one who didn't fight back, the one who stayed in the shadows so Ethan could shine. But behind the scenes, in the world that actually mattered, I was preparing for a takeover. I stood in a private atelier, the kind of place where you need $1 billion net worth just to get an appointment. The lead stylist, a man named Julian who had dressed royalty, was circling me like I was a piece of art. The midnight blue silk. He whispered, more to himself than to me. It matches the coldness in your eyes, but the silver embroidery, it speaks of the fire underneath. I looked at myself, and for a second, I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror.
Who was she?
The girl who slept under her desk to finish a line of code? Or this woman, draped in a fabric that cost more than a mid-sized sedan? Ethan thought I belonged in Target, and maybe a part of me still felt like I did. But that was the version of me he had created, a version I had outgrown years ago. Every day, the family group chat would explode with updates about the wedding. Jennifer posted pictures of the curated floral arrangements, white peonies and gold-leafed roses. Only the best for our perfect day, she'd caption them. Ethan would chime in about the guest list, bragging about the minor influencers and local socialites who had RSVP'd. I watched it all like a spectator, a ghost at my own family's feast. My mother called me once to ask if I could help with the seating chart. Since you're not coming, you'll have plenty of time to organize the spreadsheet. You're so good with computers, Emma. I almost laughed. She wanted the billionaire founder of a cybersecurity empire to act as her unpaid secretary, because she still saw me as a tool, not a person. Sure, Mom, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. Send it over. I did it. I organized their seating chart. I placed the influencers at the head tables. I put the fashionable people where the cameras would see them. I was literally building the aesthetic that was designed to exclude me. It was the ultimate irony. But while they were obsessed with where people would sit, I was obsessed with what the world would see. My assistant, Claire, had been working overtime with the gala's PR team. We weren't just attending, we were controlling the narrative. Every major tech journalist had been briefed. The Forbes photographer had been given exclusive access to my table. I wasn't just going to a party, I was going to a coronation. And the best part? Ethan and Jennifer had no idea that their perfect Hamptons estate was only 90 miles away from the hotel where I would be crowned the queen of the industry. We were on a collision course, and I was the only one who knew the impact was coming. June 15th arrived with a sun so bright it felt like a spotlight or a warning. The weather was perfect, 75 degrees, zero humidity. The kind of day that makes wedding photographers ecstatic, and the kind of day that makes hearts break. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of my phone screaming with notifications. The family group chat was a war zone of excitement. My mother was posting photos from the Hamptons, the white tents being raised, the ocean sparkling in the background. Today is the day, she wrote. Everything is perfect. Ethan and Jennifer look like they've stepped out of a movie. I looked at those photos, and for the first time, I didn't feel that familiar sting of rejection. I felt nothing. Just the cold, quiet focus of a soldier before a battle. At 2 p.m., my stylist arrived. For the next 4 hours, I wasn't Emma the sister, or Emma the computer nerd. I was a project. Julian, the man from the boutique, was obsessive. The makeup must be invisible but powerful, he commanded. We want her to look like she was born with this much authority. They painted my face with precision. They sculpted my hair into a masterpiece of midnight silk, and then they brought out the dress. The custom Ellie Saab. It was a masterpiece in midnight blue silk, with hand-embroidered silver details that caught the light like dying stars. It hadn't just cost $45,000, it had cost me years of my life. Every late night, every missed holiday, every tear I'd ever shed in my lonely apartment, it was woven into those threads. When I finally stood up, fully dressed, Julian went silent. He didn't say a word. He just stepped back and gestured toward the mirror. I looked and I gasped. The woman in the mirror wasn't wedding material, she was the person who owned the wedding. She looked powerful, polished, and dangerously beautiful. "The jewelry, ma'am," Claire whispered, stepping forward with a velvet box. Inside were the pieces I'd bought at auction, a diamond necklace and matching earrings that had once belonged to a French aristocrat. $280,000 of history resting against my skin. Ethan thought I'd ruin his photos. I whispered to my reflection. I wonder how he's going to feel when he realizes I'm the only one in this family who actually belongs in the photos he's so desperate for. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A message from Ethan. "The ceremony is starting soon. Everyone is asking where you are. I told them you were sick. Keep it that way on social media today, please. Don't ruin this for Jennifer." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on my old life, and as I descended toward the waiting limousine, I felt the last bit of Emma the Invisible vanish into the air. The limousine pulled up to the Plaza Hotel at exactly 7:30 p.m. The city air was cool, but the energy around the red carpet was electric. I could see the flashes of the cameras from inside the car, a rhythmic blinking that felt like a heartbeat. This was it. The moment Emma the Shadow became Emma the Sun. The driver opened the door, and as I stepped out, the world seemed to go quiet for a split second before the chaos began. "Emma Chin," someone shouted, then another. "Emma, over here. Look at the camera." I didn't rush. I walked with a slow, deliberate grace that I didn't know I possessed. Every click of my heels on the pavement felt like a statement. I posed. I smiled. I turned just enough for the silver embroidery on my back to catch the light. I wasn't just a guest here. I was the guest of honor. 90 miles away in the Hamptons, Ethan and Jennifer were likely finishing their vows. I could almost see it. The white flowers, the ocean breeze, the perfect guests in their perfect outfits. Ethan was probably feeling proud of himself, thinking he had successfully protected his wedding from the embarrassment of my presence. Inside the ballroom, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and old money. My business partner, David, met me near the entrance. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and shook his head in disbelief. "Emma," he whispered, "you look powerful. If I didn't know you, I'd be intimidated." "Good," I replied, taking a sip of champagne. "That's the point." We moved through the crowd, shaking hands with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, venture capitalists who controlled billions, and politicians who shaped the country's future. These people didn't care about my vibe or my aesthetic, they cared about my mind. They respected what I had built. But the digital world is a small place. As the appetizers were being served, I noticed people glancing at their phones, then looking at me, then whispering to their neighbors. The crossover was starting. Someone at the gala followed someone at the wedding, or a journalist had seen my brother's earlier posts. The contrast was too sharp to ignore. On one side, a fashionable wedding in the Hamptons; on the other, the woman they had excluded, standing in a gown that cost more than their entire floral budget, being honored by the mayor of New York. The narrative was shifting, and it was shifting fast. The ceremony in the Hamptons was over, and the reception was just beginning. I could imagine the scene, the tinkling of crystal glasses, the soft jazz, the forced laughter of people trying too hard to look like they belonged. But while they were eating their curated appetizers, the internet was busy eating them alive. It started with a single tweet. A tech journalist who was at the gala had posted a photo of me, laughing with the mayor. The caption was simple: Emma Chin, the woman who just sold her company for $340 million, looks absolutely breathtaking tonight at the plaza. By the time the first course was served at the wedding, the wildfire had reached the Hamptons. Jennifer's influencer friends were the first to see it. They knew my name, of course they did. I was the person their bosses worked for. I imagined the moment the heir left the room. One of the bridesmaids scrolling through her feed, seeing my midnight blue gown, seeing the French diamonds, and then seeing the Forbes article that had just gone live. The Invisible Giant: How Emma Chin Built a Cybersecurity Empire in Silence. According to what I heard later, the silence didn't happen all at once. It was like a wave. A murmur here, a gasp there. Ethan was mid-conversation, laughing at a joke, when Kyle leaned over. "Dude, is this your sister?" Kyle showed him the screen. The photo of me, looking like royalty, standing in a ballroom that made their Hamptons estate look like a backyard party. Ethan grabbed the phone, his hands shaking so hard he almost dropped it. He zoomed in on my face, looking for some sign that it was a mistake, that it was someone else. But it was me. Same face, same eyes, just dramatically, undeniably elevated. "Ethan?" Jennifer hissed, her voice barely a whisper, but sharp as a knife. "That's her. That's Emma. Why is she with the mayor? Why is she wearing Elisab? You said she was a nobody." Ethan couldn't speak. He just stared at the caption, $340 million acquisition. The words must have felt like bullets. The fashion disaster he had uninvited to save his photos was currently the most talked about woman in the city. And because they had been so vocal about their perfect guest list, people were already asking the question, where is his sister? At the Plaza Hotel, the world was a different color. Here, there was no ocean breeze, only the heavy, intoxicating scent of success. I stood in the wings of the stage, listening to the mayor's voice booming through the speakers. "Innovation isn't just about code," he was saying. "It's about vision. It's about the courage to build something in the shadows that eventually changes the light for everyone else." I felt a strange, cold peace. My phone was vibrating incessantly in my clutch, a frantic, rhythmic buzzing that told me the Hamptons were in a state of emergency. My father's message, "Emma, what have you done?" stayed burned into my mind. What had I done? I had simply stopped pretending to be the person they wanted me to be. "Please join me in honoring our founder of the year, Emma Chin." The applause was thunderous. I walked onto the stage, the heels of my shoes clicking against the wood with a sound like a heartbeat. I shook the mayor's hand, took the heavy trophy, and looked out at the sea of faces. These were the titans of industry, the gatekeepers of the future. And they were all standing for me. While I was giving my speech, while I was talking about the future of security and the importance of integrity, Ethan's wedding was officially falling apart. I found out later that the reception had turned into a search party.
People weren't dancing.
They weren't toasting the happy couple. They were huddled in groups, scrolling through the Forbes article, looking at the price of my jewelry, and realizing that the poor sister was the most powerful person in the room. Jennifer, according to one of the bridesmaids, had locked herself in the bridal suite. Her perfect aesthetic was ruined. The social media tags for her wedding were being flooded with comments about me. Why isn't his sister there? Did they really uninvite a billionaire for wearing Target? The audacity of this bride. Her brand partnerships, her carefully crafted image, it was all being incinerated by the light of my success. "I want to thank those who believed in me when I had nothing," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and resonant. "But more importantly, I want to thank those who didn't. You gave me the silence I needed to build my empire." You gave me the motivation to prove that worth is not something you wear, it's something you are. I didn't mention Ethan. I didn't mention the wedding. I didn't have to. The omission was louder than any shout. I walked off that stage as a legend, and as I stepped back into the ballroom, I finally pulled out my phone. I opened the family group chat. There were 52 missed calls, 100 messages. I scrolled past the anger, past the confusion, and stopped at a message from Ethan sent just 2 minutes ago. Emma, please.
Pick up.
Jennifer is losing her mind. Everyone is talking. Just tell them you were there. Tell them it's a mistake. Please. The silence in my penthouse was different today. It wasn't the peaceful silence of success. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a reckoning. My parents and Ethan had arrived an hour ago, and for the first 10 minutes, they couldn't even speak. They just wandered through my home, staring at the original Picasso on the wall, the hand-woven silk rugs, and the view of the city that usually belongs only to gods and kings. How long? My father finally asked, his voice cracking. He was sitting on a Barcelona chair that cost more than his car, looking at me like I was a stranger. How long have you been living like this, Emma? How long have you been this person? I've always been this person, Dad, I said, my voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. I was this person when I was sleeping under my desk. I was this person when you were complaining that I didn't visit enough because I was just playing with computers. The only thing that changed is the number in my bank account. But to you, that's the only thing that makes me visible, isn't it? My mother started to cry, the quiet, performative sobbing that she used whenever she was losing an argument. We didn't know, sweetheart. We thought you were struggling. We just wanted you to have a stable life. No, Mom. I interrupted, my voice cold. You didn't think I was struggling. You thought I was boring. You thought I was a background character in Ethan's movie. And Ethan? I turned my gaze toward my brother. You didn't uninvite me because you were worried about my stability. You uninvited me because you were ashamed of a sister who didn't fit your aesthetic. How does it feel now, knowing that I was the only real luxury your family ever had? Ethan looked up, his eyes red. Jennifer is leaving for her mother's house, he whispered. The sponsors for her blog are dropping her. They're calling her a fake socialite, a bully. Our wedding photos, the ones we spent $15,000 on, no one wants to see them. All they want to see is the photo of you and the mayor. He looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time in years. You ruined us, Emma. You knew what would happen if you went to that gala. You knew the press would find out. You did this on purpose. I walked over to him, leaning down until I was at eye level. I didn't do anything, Ethan. I just lived my life. I went to work. I accepted an award for 7 years of blood, sweat, and tears. If my success ruins your aesthetic, then maybe your life was built on a lie to begin with. I watched as Ethan's face twisted from sadness to a desperate kind of anger, and I realized that the golden boy was about to show me exactly how far he was willing to go to save himself. You don't understand, Emma? Ethan's voice cracked, the sound echoing off the marble floors like a gunshot. Jennifer's entire career, her whole identity, it was built on that wedding. The sponsors, the brands, they're pulling out because they look like idiots for associating with someone who would kick her own sister out of a wedding for not being pretty enough. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, watching the golden boy crumble. And why is that my problem, Ethan? I asked, my voice as cool as a winter morning. I didn't tell her to be a bully. I didn't tell her to value a photograph over a person. She made her choice, and now she is to live with the aesthetic of her own consequences. Emma, please. My mother's voice was small, shaking. We're your family. Think about the scandal. Think about what people are saying about us on the internet. They're calling us monsters. They're saying we only love money. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. Isn't that the truth, Mom? You only started caring about my scandal when you realized my scandal was worth more than your reputation. You didn't call me to ask if I was hurt when Ethan uninvited me. You called me to tell me not to make it difficult for him. The air in the room felt thin, like we were at the top of a mountain where no one could breathe. Ethan stood up, pacing back and forth in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Fix it," he demanded, his voice turning sharp again. "You have the connections. You have the PR teams. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you were the one who chose not to come. Save her brand, Emma. If you ever cared about me, save her." I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt a wave of genuine pity.
He still didn't get it.
He was still trying to use me as a tool to fix his broken toys. "I can't save a ghost, Ethan." And that's all Jennifer's brand was, a ghost made of filters and borrowed jewelry. I walked to the door and held it open. The weight of the moment was crushing. "It's time for you to leave," I said quietly. "I've spent 10 years being the sister you ignored. I think I'll spend the next 10 being the woman you can't afford to know." Ethan stopped pacing. He looked at the open door, then at me, and I saw the realization finally hit him. He hadn't just lost a sister. He had lost the only person who actually would have stayed by his side if the world had really turned against him. He walked toward the exit, but as he passed me, he whispered something so low I almost missed it. "You're just as cold as the machines you build, Emma." I watched them walk out of my life, but as the elevator doors closed, I felt a vibration in my hand that made my heart stop. The door had clicked shut, the elevator had hummed, and then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like a victory but like a vacuum. I sat on my sofa, the same one my mother had just cried on, and looked at the space they had occupied. They were gone. My family, the people who were supposed to be my foundation, had walked out as strangers. I looked down at my phone. The vibration I'd felt wasn't a message from Ethan or my father. It was an email. A notification from a private investigator I'd hired months ago, back when I still thought I could buy my way into their hearts. I opened it, my breath catching in my throat. It was a series of financial records, Ethan's records. I hadn't looked at them in weeks, but there was a massive debt. A loan taken out in my name, using a forged signature. Ethan hadn't just been subsidized by my parents. He had been stealing from the small trust fund my grandfather had left me, the one I hadn't touched because I didn't need it. He hadn't uninvited me just because of the aesthetic. He had uninvited me because he was terrified I'd talk to the family lawyer at the wedding. He was terrified I'd find out he'd spent my inheritance on Jennifer's borrowed lifestyle. The golden boy was a thief, and I was his victim, long before I ever became his rival. A knock came at the door. Not the elevator, the service entrance. I frowned, setting the glass down. I walked over, checking the security camera. It was Jennifer. She was standing there, her makeup ruined, wearing a hoodie and leggings, looking nothing like the influencer she pretended to be. I opened the door, and she didn't wait for an invitation. She pushed past me, her eyes frantic. "You have to stop them," she breathed, her voice raw. "The bank, the sponsors, they're not just dropping me, Emma. They're investigating. They think the wedding was a money laundering scheme because of the debt Ethan piled up. He told me you were the one who authorized it." Jennifer cried, her voice rising to a scream. "He said you were helping us. I didn't know he forged your name. Please, if they find out, I'll go to prison with him. You have the money, you can pay it off, you can make it go away." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a villain. I saw another person Ethan had used to build his aesthetic. She was just as much a prop in his movie as I had been. "I can't pay for a lie, Jennifer," I said, my voice like ice. "I spent my whole life being invisible so he could shine. I'm not going to be his accomplice in the dark." Jennifer slumped against the wall, the realization finally hitting her. The perfect life they had curated, the one they had excluded me to protect, was built on a foundation of sand. And the tide was finally coming in. I walked her to the door, not with anger, but with a heavy, weary finality. "Go home, Jennifer. Call a lawyer. Because tomorrow, the world is going to find out that the golden child doesn't just ruin photos, he ruins lives." The morning after the reckoning was the quietest morning of my life. The sun rose over New York, indifferent to the scandals of the night before. I stood on my balcony, breathing in the crisp air, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was hiding. The truth was out. The debt was being handled by my legal team, and the golden boy was finally facing the shadows he had created. Ethan and Jennifer's perfect aesthetic had vanished overnight, replaced by the cold, hard reality of a police investigation and social media exile. They had tried to build a kingdom on a foundation of lies and exclusion, but in the end, the very people they tried to impress were the ones who tore them down. I didn't take revenge. I didn't have to. I simply let the world see them for who they really were, while I continued to be who I had always been. I used a fraction of my acquisition money to set up a foundation, a place for the invisible ones, the nerds, the outcasts, the ones who don't fit the vibe. Because I know now, more than ever, that those are the people who actually change the world. My parents still call, their messages are tentative now, full of a respect that feels a little too late and a little too heavy. I answer sometimes, but the distance is there. It's a distance I didn't create, but one I have learned to live with. You can't buy a family's genuine love, and you certainly can't fix a lifetime of dismissal with a single bank transfer. Life is different now. I don't wear my fashion disaster clothes to hide anymore, and I don't wear my $45,000 gowns to prove a point. I wear what I want. I go where I please, and I surround myself with people who value substance over surface. Ethan wanted a wedding that would last forever in photos, but I built a life that will last forever in impact. As for Ethan and Jennifer, I heard they moved to a small town away from the cameras, away from the influencers. Maybe there, without the pressure of an aesthetic, they can finally learn how to be real people. I hope they do, but I won't be there to watch. Your worth is not a curated post, it's not a custom dress, and it's certainly not defined by the people who are too blind to see your light. Build your empire in the silence, keep your head down, and when the time is right, let your success be the only noise they hear. Because at the end of the day, the truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Thank you for listening to this journey on Bitter and Sweet. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own hidden strength, don't forget to like and share. Your support means everything to us. Until next time, stay true to your own light, even when the world tries to dim it.
Goodbye.